Hey everybody, Glenn from Third Millennium. Going to do a slightly different video. We just picked up recently a new test Miata for our work, a 2012, one of the NC series, and it's a 2012 sport model. Has the appearance package. We'll get a couple of videos of that so you guys can see it. It's really nice Miata. It's got the mica blue paint on it, and it's going to be a good car for us to do some project work on, and we're going to have a bunch of videos about that. It's also going to be a lot of fun to drive around, of course, so we'll also have a good time with that. So that adds to the fleet. One of our first things we're going to do for this car is we're going to install a really nice stereo system into it. And so what we thought we'd do to make it a little bit more interesting is we would shoot a video of the whole process. And so we're going to start out with this video, where I'm going to take a couple minutes, show you what we're going to install, and go over a little bit of strategy. We're actually going to break out the wiring diagrams for the car, where we can go over how to do some things that we've had some questions about from some owners, like where do we attach the power supply for an external amp and those types of things. So let's take a few minutes, and I'll get the camera focused in on the workbench here, and let's talk about what it is we're actually going to put into this car. Alright, so here we go. What we decided to do on this Miata was put in a nice Pioneer unit. This is their AVH601EX. Has a number of nice things in it, including Bluetooth, of course. It's got a full interface for whatever type of smartphone you might have. Motorized front screen for access to a DVD, CD insert, HD radio technology. So this will be a nice unit to put into the car. Now, we decided we're going to couple this with this amp. And the reason we picked this amp, we get a lot of questions from people about recommending amps for in a Miata. This one we actually like. The strategy is going to be, we're going to use the amplifier built into the radio just to drive the rear speakers. Now, on the third generation Miata, a lot of questions about the rear speakers. We're going to do a separate video on that. But for the purpose of what we're doing now for the install, we're not going to focus so much on what those speakers are as getting this system into place. We are going to use our M800 speakers for the doors, and we'll cover that in detail for you as well. But this amp, this is also a Pioneer amp. This is a GM-D1004. What's unique about this? A couple of things. One of the main things, of course, with a Miata is getting something that's actually going to fit into the vehicle. Now, this is about the size of a brick, which makes it really nice for installation behind the panel, and weight-wise, probably a little over an amp, or excuse me, a little over a pound. And they've got a setup with a couple of clips for mounting this into a firewall. We'll actually get into the car a little bit, see where exactly we can put this. But the thing that I found really appealing about this, and by the way, you can disregard what it says on the box about the 400 watts max. I mean, again, that's a meaningless number. That's an instantaneous peak number, that doesn't really mean anything in the real world. What really is interesting about this, though, is it's actually a 4-channel amp, 4 discrete channels in here, and it is, if you're familiar with it at all, it is what you would call a Class D amplifier, which is a fairly efficient amp, which is getting a lot of use in car audio systems because of the efficiency of it. And because we have 4 discrete channels, but we're only going to use 2 for the left and right doors, that means we can actually bridge, and that's built in with a selector here. We can actually bridge the outputs on this for the for those two channels. And we should be able to get a pretty clean 30 or 40 watts on this. We'll do another video where we'll actually test this amp. But in general, the thing with car amplifiers, if you know a little bit about electronics, you're working with 14 volts when the car is running, the alternator's running. So there's an actual limit you can get in the output power, which is why most radios, regardless of what they say, put out 10 to 13 watts of power. Most external amps like this will step the voltage up before they then use that. That gives them the capacity for a little bit more power. This has a 15 amp fuse in it, so it's a pretty much giveaway that realistically what you're going to get out of this is 30 or 40 watts. But if you can get 30 or 40 watts of clean power, not a 10% distortion or some ridiculous number like that, it's going to sound pretty good, especially with our M800s. You'll get really nice bass out of it, and you won't have to resort to a huge amount of money. I think we paid $90 for this thing. This is the right size for a Miata. Couple of selectors on it. There's a multi-pin for the output, and we've got a signal input, and they provide both RCA connectors, which is what we're going to use for the radio, as well as speaker level inputs if you needed it. It is set up, you could use this to run a sub. Most subs have a built-in amp at this point, and so for a Miata that's not terribly relevant. But we're going to use this in two-channel mode. Going to run the RCA connectors to this. So this ought to be a nice little addition to the project. So we're going to use that, and we're also going to use a whole bunch of mounting accessories to make all this stuff work. Let's quickly go through those just so you see what it is we have to work with. First thing, steering wheel controls. We do have them in a Miata. Now, to be fair, the radio controls are about 4 inches from your hand while you're driving. So the idea of steering wheel controls is quite a luxury. But we do have this. This is from from Access. And this is the ASWC1, which is sort of a universal fit adapter. It comes with a small box that does all of the magic. Usually for this type of radio, there's only a couple of the connectors that we're actually going to need. It's got a access port here, updating the firmware in this, and then a multi-pin connector. We'll jump over to the computer because one of the first things you ought to do with these is update them. It's really nice, just like computers or a lot of other electronic devices. They do have updates that they regularly release for these, and the updates are generally fixes to things and direct support for the newer model radios. So that's a good idea to do. So we'll go ahead and we'll show how we do that as well. All right, then got to get this thing into the dash. This is the from Metra, the 997519B. So this is going to cover your Miatas from 2009 to 2015. It comes with a bunch of pieces, double DIN, single DIN. We're obviously going to be using this one right on the top here, single DIN, and then the AC controls down here. So this is really something you're just going to have to get with the product from Metra. A number of good suppliers have these. Amazon does, places like Crutchfield, which we actually like. Crutchfield can sometimes be a couple bucks more for the products, but they really do provide some pretty good service, and of course have these accessories. You don't have to go hunting for them as well. So that's another item that we've got to have. Then we've got the Metra. This is actually a vehicle harness adapter, 707903, and what this does, this allows us to, instead of cutting any wires, this allows us to plug directly into the wiring in the Miata. So we'll make our connections between this and the harness plug that comes with the radio such that when we get out to the car, we'll mostly be just plugging things in and not having to do any work behind the dash or upside down inside the vehicle. So this will do most everything. Couple things it doesn't do. We're probably going to put a camera on the back license plate just for reverse. Not because you need it so much for visibility in a Miata, although when the soft top's up, the visibility isn't as great in the back. So it's not a bad thing to have. But the reverse cameras are so cheap, we figured why not? Let's go ahead and do one of those as well. So we get this wired up. Then we've also got this little guy we're going to put into place. This is actually a bypass unit. Now, most of the radios that have displays in them have a safety feature where they disable the ability to play videos and so forth unless the emergency brake is set on the car. That's probably a pretty good idea anyway, but because that also disables a lot of the menus and so forth, and we are going to be using this as a test vehicle and want to be able to get to those, this little device, which they sell all over the place for about $15, actually defeats that purpose. We don't recommend doing that in your car. We think the idea of some reasonable safety stuff is some features like that is not a bad thing. So this we are going to put this in, but it's not something that we're suggesting to you, but I want to go ahead and mention it to you as well. And then I'm going to come over and I'm going to get the wiring diagram out. We're going to take just a second. We're going to look at the wiring setup for the Miata and strategize a little bit about how we're going to put this in, and specifically how we're going to power the amp. All right, here we go. This is the actual factory service manual schematics. We're going to look first at the audio system without the Bose audio from the factory. The reason we're going to look at this is we're going to take a minute, look at what the setup actually is in here. Then we're going to look at the Bose setup, compare the two, and it's going to give us a couple of insights, both in terms of dealing with the rear speakers and then also with how we're going to power things. First thing I want to point out here is this is for the 6-speaker type setup. The Sport model does have that. Most of the models that are out there do have that. There are a couple that do not just have the single door speakers. But this does have the rear speakers, and I just want to point out we do have discrete left and right channels going to the back, and we're going to actually make use of those. We've got our accessory fuse up here. We've got a 15 amp fuse here that we're actually getting supply to this audio unit. We have plenty of power for the audio itself, so that's not actually going to be a problem. Now, what I want to show you up here is with the Bose system, we have a couple of interesting things. One, you look here, there's a common connector in the back which delivers the rear channel to both speakers. It's actually the same signal, and they are connected in parallel, so the two rear speakers are only delivering a single channel of audio. So that's just something to factor into place, even if you replace the unit. And this connector is in the back behind the passenger's right shoulder. And that means in order to get true distinct channel sound back here, you're going to need to do some rewiring up here because there's only a single channel that's being sent back. One other thing that we point out about this is the Bose does have an audio amplifier set up discrete from the radio, and we're going to make use of that. If I come back here to the dash with Bose. Okay, here we go. What we see is there's an extra audio channel here that has a 20 amp fuse to feed the amplifier, and this is the fuse panel which is down by the driver's left foot. So we're going to take a look. We haven't actually done it yet, but we're going to take a look and see if this connector is there in the fuse box. Usually the fuse block is the same for all of the models of vehicles. They just may or may not have a fuse in it and the wiring in it. Sometimes even the harness is the same though. But that would be perfect for us because we need 15 amps for the amplifier, and if we can get it right off of that fuse block, then we do not need to run out to the battery through the firewall, and it'll make everything much easier in terms of the installation. The radio itself gets this same 15 amp input here, the same accessory over here, which is used for some lighting and some other things for the vehicle. So the setup for the antenna switching, which is powered on both the Bose and the non-Bose, that's about the same. So we'll get into that as well. But this is what our strategy is going to be. We're going to see if we can actually enable and get this 20 amp power here for our new Pioneer Power Amp. And if that's the case, that'll solve that problem very neatly for us. So anyway, hope this is a good start to the project for you guys, and you follow along with us as we do this over the next couple of weeks, and we'll be releasing these videos as we do the work. And we hope it's been helpful. Go ahead, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Give us a like, we appreciate that. And check back soon, and then you'll get an automatic notification if you are subscribed when we release the next video in this series, so you can follow along with us. Hope this helps you guys out with your Miatas. Thanks very much.